Yeah, sir.
Yeah, what I suggest is if you can connect with me sometime after the class, I will give you the guidelines. Yeah.
I After the class, I'll connect to you.
Yeah, yeah. So then I will tell you in person. I will discuss with you. Okay.
Okay, sir.
All right. Uh, okay. We are continuing with the application of development center in the talent management activity. So last week we have covered the major infrastructural requirement. This week we will cover how do you further organize. The most important things, I would say, the soft part of the development center, which is really hard, which is not easy. The hard part of it was much easier than the soft part. Here there is a lot of human interface, and that requires tremendous amount of care and due diligence. The issues that we are going to discuss this week are: how do you select a participant for the development center? How do you actually source the participants for the development center? What should be the venue for this? And the schedule should be prepared in such a way that it's convenient for all the participants of that particular batch to be able to take part in each of these activities. It should not happen that some participants are not able to, technically, it is not feasible for them to participate. And then the actual participants and the equipment that you require and which should be kept ready before the development center actually starts, and who are the SSRs and what kind of preparation is required from the SSS point of view. These are all very, very important dimensions of a successful development center. So let's go through this. Now, how do you select the participants for development center? As we discussed in the previous classes, a person who comes to the development center, he is not coming there for any, you know, it's not a punishment to go to a development center. People will feel that, I'm being referred to a development center means there is no deficiency in him or her. Basic purpose of development center is you are being prepared for your next role. You are being prepared for taking a responsibility which is probably higher than what you are currently holding. And therefore, development center helps in identifying the gaps in the person so that the rectification work can be done before the person is granted a new position. And hence, one way to source the development center candidates is ask the people to volunteer themselves. Those are those who are interested for moving up their career. Those who want to, improve their career prospects can give their names and ask them to come and participate in the development center voluntarily. Then, if that is the case, everybody may opt for it. But then you have to tell them to clearly identify their goals and objectives for opting for the development center. If those are fair, objective, and purposeful, you can certainly look at them for referring to the development center. The second way is to ask the supervisors to nominate the people for development center. Right? So method for selecting, once they opt for that, then you can have some criteria or a committee can be put into place who will identify the people required for the development center. If the number of required the candidates offering are more than the number of vacancies there in the development center, obviously you'll have to have some objective criteria by which you can choose the required number of candidates for the development center. What should be the criteria? Depends on the context, the organization, the position, the time available, and all that. And if a person takes a decision, he can be accused of some biases. Therefore, ideally, you should have a committee which will go into the details of the candidates and finally make recommendation on who should go to the development center. Please remember that sending a candidate to a development center means it is going to incur some cost, and therefore one has to be careful about sending people only for a purpose, right? Now, you can also, if you have some past data of the candidates in the organization, that too can be taken for as a reference for shortlisting the candidates. If all this is not good enough and you want to get a feel of the candidate before you take a decision on the candidate, you can also call them for interviews, personal interviews, and probe them further before you take a decision on the individual concerned. Now, that's a very delicate process. People should not feel that there is any unfairness or bias in identifying the candidates for the development center. Also, one should never give the feeling that if I am referred to a development center, I am certain for the promotion. I think development center is only a process by which you identify the gaps in the competencies. And once those competency gaps are identified, the responsibility for the correction of those things will largely remain with the candidate himself by preparing an individual development plan with the consultation of the supervisor and the L&D department. So therefore, a ticket to development center does not automatically mean there is a career progression. It is a step forward for career progression, but not a guarantee for career progression. Now, what should be the venue? Venue is very, very important. First of all, the venue should be away from the workplace, because if you are in the workplace, it can always be a possibility that the boss will call you for some work at the other end between, and you may miss some of the activities of the development center. Further, you also need to have a focus on what you are doing there. When you are in the development center, your entire thinking should be revolving around what is happening in the development center. You should not be thinking about what is happening back in your workplace. So the venue is very, very important. It must be the focus is completely on the process that happens in the development center. A large room is required for group discussions and activities. I mean, the configuration of the rooms is very, very important, because a development center typically will have, 10 to 25 candidates. Ideally, not more than 25, not less than 10. And therefore, for the large group, you must have a fairly big room which can seat all these people for any briefing sessions, for any discussions and all. Apart from that, you also have to have rooms for the various activities. Now, space must be sufficiently available to perform group activities, because some of these things are small group activities. Therefore, you must have the facility to accommodate those small group activities. Smaller rooms are required for role plays, in-basket exercises, etc. And in those rooms, the required paraphernalia, if you require to play a role play, then the kind of environment that it requires is to be set up in between. Similarly, for in-basket exercise, these days we don't have any physical movement of paper in the office. It has to be virtual movement of papers. So the required computer and the prior preparation in terms of the incoming paid mails and outgoing mails, all those things have to be organized, and there should be minimal disturbance from any external sources. First, primarily, it should have a fairly good noise-proof environment, and he or she should not be disturbed during the process. Therefore, a venue away from workplace is always a much better choice than doing it in the office space. Then the schedule preparation requires some amount. It is more of an art and less of a science. You must provide sufficient time for the performance of the activity. The participants should not be rushed through. And while the participants are performing an activity or a simulation, they must have the assessor should have sufficient time to make observations and make recordings of that. It is very difficult to go back and try to do it anything to think back and try to make an observation recorded, because it should be done concurrently. Then you are absolutely sure that what you have observed you have recorded. Otherwise, it's a sort of imagining what happened at that point in time and then trying to make a record. It may not be always accurate, right? Now, I think the participant, if he is trying to display certain competencies, she should not be cut short or discouraged. Therefore, the participant should also have sufficient time to demonstrate his or her competencies. Set time for integration of various observations and inferences made by the assessor for various exercises. No, what happens is you have got an activity or a simulation, the assessors making the observations, and after they make the observations, the all the assessors should sit together and discuss on each candidate, look at the variation among their observations, and finally they must come up with only one observation which is acceptable to all. And the candidate will finally get only single feedback and a single reporting report about him, and therefore there should be no differences of opinion, and some assessors should not say that I disagree with this, I disagree with that. So you should have sufficient time and space for the assessors should to sit together, reflect on the candidate, answer those competencies, and agree upon what is commonly accepted by all of them. Now, steps in the finalizing schedule: the group must be addressed together first and must come together for completion of one activity, right? The smaller groups must be formed like role plays, smaller group discussions, etc., so that the participant can work more closely with each other. That is where you can see some competencies which can only be displayed in the small group activities. Individuals must be allowed to do their own activity, and thereafter the groups can come together for the final exercise. So it is a well structured, well simulated, well documented time schedule that you must have, and you must follow it meticulously so that time management gives the confidence to the participants that everything is going on smooth, and that's a very very important dimension in any of the development center processes. Then the participants should be able to manageable, the center should have the capacity to manage them, and ideally it should be around 10 to 25, but I wouldn't even prefer 25. Maybe somewhere around 15 to 20 probably is a better number, because a lot of documentation, a lot of observation is involved. Observing even 25 people is not that easy. So anything between 10 to 20 is a much preferable number in my personal view. More than 25% would lead 25 would lead to challenges in schedule management, data recording, and integration of data. And finally, the whole burden passes on to the SSS. Then SSS will not be able to do a fair and objective job. Now, equipment is something, when the development process are curated at that time itself, the equipment required at the center for successful completion of a batch of participants should be well thought out. Definitely, what you need in the development center are the printer, photocopying machine, filing equipment like file folders, L folders, punching machine, etc. Then the place cards where you have to put the name, a number of the participant, name tags, stationery, laptops, desktops, internet, etc., Wi-Fi, etc. Now you must have the first participant should not be identified by his or her name. Preferably, they should be identified by a number, ID number, and therefore do not use the name tag there. Just put the number so that there are no biases. You just address by a name, then you don't have to have any individual identity there. Then printers and copiers should be carefully used to ensure that no leakage of information. Whatever happens in the development center has a lot of bearing on the individual's career progression, and therefore there are people who can misuse this data. It can be politicized. It can be, if the information goes into wrong hands, the that person can be adversely affected by some unwanted interferences from his competitors or his people who are hostile to him or her. Therefore, we must make sure that the data from the development center does not go out by any under any circumstances. Obviously, these SSRs and all, they will not do any such thing. But people at the lower levels who are working at the photocopying machine or printing machine or some such thing, they should not take away any paper and leak it out to somebody else who are hostile to the candidates who are in the development center. Now, all stationery, pens, pads, pencils, etc., must be provided and accessible to the SSRs at any point in time in plenty. They should not be running around, roaming around, waiting for a paper and a pencil, because some observations are very, very important. They should be done there, then and there, as they happen. Therefore, they should have adequate amount of stationery, and they should not be. Their mind should not be distracted from the work that is going on in the process that is happening in the development center. Therefore, these should be handy for them. Now, there is a need for the assessors to be prepared thoroughly so that they are able to do a very, very objective, thorough, and a job that meets the organization's requirement. So he or she must be provided with the complete details of the development process. We have discussed in the previous session that they must have a list of candidates, their background, the SOP for the development center, the competencies required, the job description plus the competencies required for the job. All that information should be provided to them adequately in advance. They must be able to go through this data much before the development center actually commences, and if they have any doubts, clarifications, they should have an opportunity to get those things clarified so that when they start doing the work, they are completely thorough with what is required to be done. Necessary calibration exercise must be conducted at the beginning of the DC, where each exercise and its components and of the observations, competencies, and inferences should be clearly defined and agreed upon with all the assessors. And as far as possible, the documentation must be easy for them, the assessor friendly. They should not be making long statements of their observations. So to the extent possible, you reduce it to a say, stage where they can easily tick mark some predefined parameters so that they can have more time to observe and less time on the recording of the on the document. Now, clear definition of competencies and their indicators makes them all to observe the same way, and that standardization helps you in getting uh, evenly placed report about the candidates. So that's a very, very important process for the SSRs. The SSRs must integrate. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, they must integrate all that they have prepared, three or four of them. They have to sit together and prepare one simple, one integrated report. And the individual reporting that they are preparing should actually help them lead to the final integrated report. So they should not be confusing to them towards the end. So this requires a thorough thinking in terms of how it is going to be recorded, how it is going to be integrated, and therefore it is preferable for all the assessors to meet and discuss how they're going to do this before the development center process starts, so that there are no differences in their working post the development center at the concluding stage. The coordination between the SSS is of utmost importance to ensure a smooth and unified experience of the DC, and this requires periodic meetings during the day. Therefore, the development center also should have a place or a room where they can all sit together and reflect on what they plan to do and how do they coordinate with each other. Now, sometimes, with the availability of internet and as much bandwidth as you want, seamless integration of all the processes should be possible even on the virtual space. Now, in a current environment, it may not be difficult to have virtual development center, because making people to travel to distant places and disturbing their personal life will be unfair. Therefore, virtual development centers are also possible. The only thing is here you must customize what suits the virtual environment. What is done in a physical environment may not be possible in the virtual environment. So it requires a little more, hard thinking and curating the activities which will suit the virtual environment. And most important thing is that you behavioral observation is key aspects of the aspect of development center. that is not all that easy to do it in a virtual environment. So in a virtual environment, first of all, people should have sufficient bandwidth and everybody should be available on the screen so that the assessors can look at their behavior. And if that is not possible, if there are disturbances, the whole purpose will be defeated. Therefore, first we must make sure that there must be a seamless connectivity on the internet. The clarity of the images should be good, and the timelines may have to be followed. And as if you're doing in a physical environment, everybody should get equal opportunity, and nobody should feel that I did not get adequate chance to demonstrate my competencies. Any questions so far? Are we all okay?
Thanks, San, for the points on virtual. Could you give a few more because that comes up almost entirely every time? So, what kind of activities can be curated from a virtual perspective where we don't lose the uh, essence of the whole thing if they were face to face?
Okay, wonderful. Very good question. Right now we have seven of you on the call, but all of you are not on video, right? If it were to be a physical class, the beauty about a physical class environment is the teacher or the instructor can also get the cues from the faces, the body language of the participants, how it is being absorbed. I mean, a seasoned teacher, by looking at the class, can get a feel of what's happening, what is getting transferred from him or her to the listeners or the participants. But in an environment, virtual environment where you're not able to see the face of each of the participants, you really do not know what's happening behind the screen. Whether you are effective, whether people are able to absorb it, whether you're on the glued out to the session, or are you doing something else, is really not known. And therefore, one thing that we must ensure, and quite often, even when the sessions, when we insist that people should be physically be seen on the screen, a lot of people come up with excuses saying that my bandwidth is not sufficient, I am on phone, I am not on my desktop or laptop, therefore I cannot switch on my camera. Various kinds of things will happen. So one problem that you have to first ensure, one issue that you have to make sure is that everybody is on the call in physical form with their video on. And that video on is also that they must be adequately seen. Quite often, I also find where you insist on that physical presence in the video, they will only be showing, their forehead and some part of their head and not the whole body up to their chest or something like that. So that makes you a bit uncomfortable to make any comments or observations on what their behaviors are, what they are doing. That is number one. Number two, we must define the protocols of participation in the virtual environment much more explicit than the physical presence. In a physical presence of a classroom environment, you have better control on the participants, whereas in the virtual environment, you do not have the same level of control. And in a physical environment, when you are doing some role play or group discussion, the participants can also look at each other face to face, and that makes a lot of impact. Whereas in a virtual group discussion, we really cannot have that kind of atmosphere where the importance of body language can also make a difference in the for the observations by the assessors. Definitely, a virtual environment may be a better suited one where you're using some machine-based simulations, but any simulation that requires some human presence is going to be a bit difficult. And one of the biggest challenges in virtual environment is if somebody is faking a behavior, it's not easy to identify the faking of behavior in a virtual mode. Whereas in a physical mode, it's much easier. Your eyes will speak it out louder than what you wanted to say. So when you are doing a DC for the sake of career positioning or the career advancement, and if some people have the opportunity to fake their behavior, that is not in the interest of the organization. So therefore, where behavioral observations are very key to certain processes, virtual environment may not be the ideal setting. So therefore, if it is possible, some of the activities can be done in hybrid virtual, and some may be done in a physical mode, but that requires a lot of skill in the scheduling. So these are all the complexities. A hybrid may be a much better cost effective solution, but that requires a lot of thinking and planning and seamless operation for the development center. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, son.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Then we will move on if you have no other questions from others. Okay. So, what are the challenges faced in organizing the DC? First is choosing the right set of participants. Now, that challenge is, see, you are at a DC, you are getting the input from somebody else. You are not choosing the candidate. Now, the candidates are selected by someone else, and that someone else may or may not have all these inputs, and you may not have the ability to question. You may not have the freedom to question the choice of the candidates who are coming to you. All that the development center head can say is these are the criteria on which you should select the candidates, but you cannot really enforce it because you're only doing a third party's job most likely, and that's a sort of a consultancy, and the input quality of the candidate, you don't have much hold on them. All that you can do is guide them, guide the organization so that they will select the appropriate candidates. Then the selecting the assessors. Assessors are generally in short supply. Good assessors are anything that is qualitatively superior is always in short supply, and therefore, same way the good assessor also is in short supply, and they are the quality of the assessors makes a significant difference in terms of your uh, quality of output. So, and quite often the assessors, the good assessors time may not be the available at the time that you want them to come to the development center, and therefore that's a big challenge. Then line managers in the DC process, they play a very significant role in terms of recommending the right kind of people. In an organization, the middle level leadership is generally what is involved in the selection of the candidates generally for the lower levels below the middle level. And for the higher level positions, it's relatively easy because as you move up the ladder, the number of layers are less, and therefore the focus is much more. But when you look at this ladder, the pyramid structure, anything below this, the number of people are more, and not all of them have similar kind of a focus. Therefore, selection of candidates is going to be difficult. Therefore, how do the line managers support the DC process, and how do they identify the candidates, and after the candidates are gone back with their feedback and the report, how do they support their career progression is also a challenge. Then standardization of rating and feedback, this requires continuous work and a lot of uh, inputs at the designing of the development center, and a common understanding, clear definition and common understanding of all the terminology in the process, and a common uniform understanding among the assessors who are involved in the development process. Of course, we discussed about the scheduling. Scheduling becomes very important because there should be no wastage of time. Nobody should miss any particular activity at any point in time, and all of them should have sufficient time. Nobody should complain that I did not have sufficient time to demonstrate my competencies, and the assessor should not feel that they did not get enough chance to make a reasonably good observation of all the participants so that they can give a very objective report. So let us go into the details of what these challenges are one by one, and then we will move on to the next stage of this chapter. Care must be taken to ensure all participants have equal level of, there must be, there should be no levels, camaraderie should be there so that you don't feel stranger, or you don't feel isolated with each other. Similar type of rules of work and work levels in the organization. If you have got two different levels of people, then there will be some discomfort for the participant to be part of the development process work, because a lot of them are team-based activities, and in team-based activities, all people should be treated as equals. That some people should not have the perception that I'm lower than him or higher than them, and therefore the egos will come into play. Mixing up two different work levels can create challenge the dynamics of the DC. Number of participants should be 10 to 25, and we have already discussed. Now, selecting the right assessors, select assess based on the DC objectives. Don't have the same people coming for this because of your relationship with certain DCs, assessors. Don't call them for every kind of assessment. I think you must align the DC's process with the competency of the assessors, so that you are making a fair and objective assessment of the participants. Assessors brought in from external environment ensures that there's no bias, and that we discussed earlier. No bias is a very, very important component of DC process, and therefore people who have got people who are labeled as having some kind of an bias should be kept away from the development center process. The preferred participant to SSR ratio is 1:2. That means for every two participants, you must have one SSR if you want to do a thorough job. So if you've got 20 people for the assessment in the center, you must have 10 SSRs, which is pretty expensive. One, they are not available easily. Number two, their time is, it's premium, and you have to pay for it. So therefore, some organizations prefer a 1:3 approach than a 1:2. So if you have got a 1:3 approach, instead of 10 SSRs, you can do with 7 SSRs or 6 SSRs. Therefore, one, your cost is reduced. Number two, the short supply of SSRs in the market can also be partly mitigated by going for 1:3 than 1:2. Designating line managers as assessors in DC process of poses challenges in securing the objective feedback. We have discussed this earlier, that internal people should not be assessors, and they must be kept away. And therefore, you should never two things are sort of thumb rules. One, don't use any internal persons as your assessors. Number two, don't conduct the DC in the same place where you are actually having your work. It should not be your own workplace. If these two things happen, the first will lead to bias and unnecessary, loss of confidence among the participants in the development process. The second one will lead to a lot of disturbances, and therefore at the end of the day you will not be able to achieve the objectives, and people will have some kind of a disappointment with the entire process. The standardization and rating of the rating and feedback. Rating is not often not standardized across different DCs if new SSR are introduced in the process. So therefore, the selection of the SSRs is very, very important, as much as the selection of the participants. So make sure feedback provided is calibrated to provide even measurement mechanism. So the ideally the assessor should sit together before the process starts. They must threadbare discuss what they want to do, how they want to do, what are the measures used, and how are they going to integrate this report entirely should be decided in advance, not either in the midway or at the end. If it is done at the end, it will be a sort of a mess. If it is in the midway, then it will disturb the whole process. Therefore, ideally, it should be discussed in the beginning of the development center process, and they must freeze it so that everybody is on the same page. The scheduling, some participants withdraw midway through the process due to work exigencies, which should be avoided. As a matter of fact, there should be a condition in the development process, participants shortlisting, that nobody should withdraw in the middle and people should continue the entire schedule, barring unforeseen circumstances of some family requirements or some personal health requirements that you can't help. Otherwise, for work exigencies, they should not be withdrawn from there. Then there is some problem with the organization's planning process. schedule it in some way, in a way that all participants commit their time and everyone comes to a TC process at the same timeline. Now, because these people may be coming from different departments in the organization or sometimes at different locations, you have to make sure that everybody comes at the same time. One of the problems in virtual DC is you don't have any control on them. uh, Sometimes they don't join and they give some lame excuse of interconnectivity. You don't even have the way to verify it. Therefore, if a physical environment is there, then part to some extent their time and their physical presence is under your, I won't say control, at least you can monitor. Therefore, the delay or absenteeism can be managed. Okay. Now, what is the format for DC scheduling? I think this is just a model that is there in the content given to you, the study material given to you. But then there's nothing sacrosanct about it. You can always change it the way that you want. But the whole purpose and the objective is it should be convenient to all the people. All the participants should be able to take part in various activities. There should be no time overlap, and the participant should be given sufficient intervals in between so that they can recharge themselves. When somebody comes from development center, they know they are being assessed for a very important purpose of career advancement or career planning, and therefore it goes without saying that they'll be under pressure. So when you are under pressure, you must have sufficient breaks so that they're able to, take it on whatever they are doing, and they display or demonstrate their actual competencies rather than complain later on saying that I could not participate because of this is the reason. So this is some indicative format, but that can be always modified based on the process required, the industry content, and all that. Right now, what are the various stages of now? Let us assume that a batch of SSR, SSRs are there and a batch of participants are there. Then what actually happens when they report there at the development center for the assessment? These are the stages which are to be followed by them. First, the briefing session, I think, which we discussed in the last session. The briefing session is a very, very crucial session for very crucial session that sets the tone, that sets the pace, that sets the comfort level of the participants, and therefore that has to be very carefully handled. Then observation, recording. Observation happens while you are doing some activities. Recording means not the recording in some, the electronic way. Recording of the observations by the assessors, then classifying, rating, integrating, and feedback. These are the various stages. So let us go through each one of them more in detail. Any questions? Is it all making sense?
Yes, sir.
Or is it
Yes, sir. Yes.
okay?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. That's great. All right. Now, this is in any process, whether it is assessment center or development center, in both the processes, first thing you have to do is put all the create that kind of a rapport among the participants. You should feel comfortable because you're going to work with different people in different activities. There must be some kind of a comfort zone for them in terms of not being a stranger. So first put them all together and give them adequate mode of briefing about why they are there, what they're going to do, what is the intended objectives of this exercise. You can even introduce them to each other, let them make comfortable themselves, and let them feel that they're all together as a team. That kind of uh, rapport building is important because at a later point, when you're putting them through some team activities, some people, if they don't open up and participate in the team activities, that will be a loss of opportunity for them. And it is a loss of opportunity for the organization also because you're not getting a fair deal of what they are, right? So the administrator, the facilitator addresses and shares with the complete transparency about the DC process. There is no secrecy. Be objective, be fair, be open, and clarify all the doubts. Shares objectives of the DC, informs about the competencies on which they would be observed. Please remember the raters or the assessor should not uh, make any assessment or mention any rating on the competencies which are not a part of the briefing for the development center. They should be strictly going by the document given by the organization on what competencies to be assessed for and not go beyond that. That is not a professional way of doing a consultancy work. Share the schedule of the DC and explain to the participants what exactly that means, who is expected to be where at what time, what are the breaks, and what are the do's and don'ts and all that, and tell them that at the end of the session they will get the feedback. Sometimes it may not be the end of all the developments in the process. Some feedback may be even given after the event is over or the simulation is over. So it depends on how you planned and drafted your schedule. So feedback at what times it is being given and how it is given, what is the intended purpose of activities and all that, you should be clear and explain to the participants. The most important thing is not faking their behavior, not being authentic in their behavior by the participant. Now, if they're not authentic in their behavior, what you're going to get is not a valued report. So, how do you make people believe that this is only going to be used for their good, for their career building, and therefore being authentic in their behavior means an opportunity for them to go for some training through the organization by which they can make themselves as better individuals. So define what should be the general scheme of DC and the expectations of the participants in the exercise. Help participants to relax and reduce their anxiety in between. In fact, that is very, very important. If they are at peace with them and they behave themselves in their natural way, authentic way, then we have more valuable inputs from the development center, which will lead to a very, very important and valuable document of recommendations for the organization, for the betterment of the organization as well as the individual. Help participants to relax and reduce their anxiety so that you have to create that paraphernalia in the development center, whatever the relaxing rooms or maybe some uh, beverage like coffee, tea, whatever they want, you must be able to keep them available to them so that people feel comfortable about it. Reassure about the confidentiality of the process and importance of not sharing the DC process with others. So both are very, very important. You will not discuss and share with anybody else. And similarly, the participant should not share and give the details to anybody else. Then the observation. We discussed in the previous class that each assessor should not observe more than two or three candidates, right? And at a time they should not assess more than two or three competencies. So even if you have got two competencies, two participants to observe and three competencies, you are actually making two into three, six observations simultaneously. You are looking at six possible observations, and that is very difficult. But then your concentration as an assessor on the task is far more superior because you cannot go wrong in your observations. They may also have secondary focus in the group dynamics because this often tends to affect the behavior of primary focus on participants. Then the assessor should have complete view of the participants, the way the seating is done, and the way he is seated. So he should have a complete view of the participants, and she can clearly see and hear the participants. So the environment, noise free, well ventilated, good temperature maintained. All that is important for conducting this, development process. The assessor clearly understands the competencies and behavioral indicators and how it is linked to each other competency. This work should be done by the assessors in advance. Therefore, the assessor should get the document related to competencies at least a week in advance so that he can reread, keep on reflecting on that, and then mentally he becomes mentally aligned to the development process for that particular batch, and the observations are actually very very useful from because yes, all prepared well in advance. The assessors are aware of various nuances of the exercise and any specific inputs they need to provide during the activity, and also any kind of changes that must be carried out in the activities to make sure that the competencies can be clearly observed. This must be uniform across all the assessors, because if you got some, let us say, 15 participants and each assessor is observing three participants, that means five assessors are observing them at a point in time in the same room. Although the same assessor may not be looking at beyond the three candidates that he is allocated, but then a uniform understanding among them and what is the definition of each competency and how it is to be observed, all that, and how to be recorded has to be clear. Otherwise, there can be some kind of gray area. Do not change the exercise during the process, even though assessors might have considerable experience. That is very important. We do, in simple terms, all that it means is let the assessors not be overconfident and shortchange the activities or exercise in the process. Then each observation may be linked to the competencies. Therefore, you must know, the assessor must have a mental map of what competencies and what are the behaviors related to that, so that he can easily recollect and record the way appropriate the observations appropriately. Now, observations. Assessors do not interfere with the participants of the activity. So, when the activity is in process, the assessors do not do any prompting, or they do not interfere with the activity. All that they do is have keen eye on the three or two participants they are supposed to observe, make valid observations of them, and keep on recording. Assessor must refrain from showing any emotions, facial expressions, or body language or gestures which might be interpreted by the participants as positive or negative indicator of their behavior. So you should sort of, the assessor should not have any facial expressions of either conformance or rejection or acceptance or non-acceptance of the thing that is happening in his front, in front of his eyes. Then assessor must move into the background, leaving the stage play for the participants to display their behaviors in the most authentic way possible. Right? Now, it also means that the area where you are conducting these activities should be well designed so that an assessor can see all the participants whom he is observing. He should be able to move behind rather than the front, and the participants should not have any distraction, or they should not even feel that somebody is observing. It should be so well designed that under observation all our behaviors get moderated. If I know that nobody is observing me, my behavior will be different from the feeling or the thought that somebody is observing me. So if the participants are under the continuous impression that somebody is observing them, they might have some. They may not have, might not demonstrate their authentic behavior. They might moderate or manipulate their behavior. Therefore, once the development center process starts, the SSS must be at the background and they should not be interfering with the participants' activity. One second. Okay, any contributions at this stage? Anyone wants to bring in their own experiences here? Yes, Mr. Leo, wanted to say something?
No, sir.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Jogal Kishore? Mr. Ranga? Ramesh Ranga?
No, sir.
No? Yeah, Preeti ma'am? Mr. Prince Kapoor?
No, sir,
Mayuri?
it's okay.
It's okay. Mayuri ma'am? Jyoti ma'am?
Sir, I have one single doubt that as the assessor plays a bigger role in giving feedback and everything, so what would be the apt profile of that assessor so that he would be a productive one?
Okay, good question. Anybody wants to respond to her? Good question. You're asking what should be the competencies of an assessor, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah. Would you like to respond, anyone?
So, sir, what I believe is the person who is an assessor should be an expert in that particular field, and the feedback to be of more of constructive one, means keeping the morale high of means the person who is being assessed, and then giving the feedback.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else?
San, while I cannot directly answer the question since I don't have that idea, what I did observe is that sometimes assessors are also intimidated by others in their own group. That means what we have tried is we have taken people of diverse assessment backgrounds, and sometimes one person is known to be senior in that group, so the other assessors tend to always agree with that senior person, and sometimes it can become a one-sided direction, and we really don't know how to sort that. Can you throw some light on that? I know it's digressing from what ma'am asked for, but I think maybe it is connected.
Okay, excellent. I think that's a very valid point that you have raised. That's what we call it as group think. If somebody in the group, there are some five SSS and one of them is considered to be a very senior guy and he has his way through, then those who are having some observations, they may not like to criticize or comment or deviate from or make any remarks on what he says. And therefore, it might so happen that, the the group's contribution may not be completely coming out. 1 second, there is some call, so I just want to attend that. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Now, this is a very important dimension. So, that also goes partly to answer what Jyoti ma'am has asked. The selection of the assessors, there should be even level playing field for every assessor, not to be dominated by one person. That is number one. Number two, as Mr. Prince Kapoor said, ma'am, I think three things that you mentioned. If you have seen, one, the person who you are selecting should have the ability to assess the competencies which are specific to the job. If I am able to assess competencies for a particular job, doesn't mean that I am also competent to assess for every job. So the background of the person should be first checked, whether he has any previous experience in making an assessment of those kinds of competencies. That is number one. Number two, he should be a team player. I think they should not have the assessor's ego should not play any role in finally preparing a report or even conducting the entire assessment process in a congenial manner. So he or she should be a team player. Number three, an assessor should have the ability to give a feedback which is easy for the candidate to receive. It should not be considered to be offensive. He should have he should be so seasoned that he should be able to give feedback in such a way that the recipient is finally able to absorb the feedback. This quality many people may not have, because most of us do not have the ability to give the feedback in a manner in which it has to be given. The purpose of feedback is not just giving the feedback. The purpose is actually it is to be observed by the recipient of the feedback, and then he or she should work on further to improve himself or herself. But if that does not happen, then the whole purpose is defeated. Quite often the feedback given by somebody and leads to some negative uh, perception of the candidate than the feedback itself. So the focus of such a person, the assessor, should be more on feedback, not on the person and the manner in which he is giving. The manner in which he is giving actually should be congenial to the reception by the participant. Does it answer your question, Jyoti ma'am?
Um, yes, sir, partially. Because these competencies which are required, we have already discussed. Like the assessor should have a proper high level of emotional intelligence, and he should have the sensitivity of interpersonal skills and all these things. But while coming to selecting an assessor, along with the competency levels, there are certain certifications. I assume they are also considered for considering them and their experience levels. So, in those aspects, what are those certifications or experiences which are considered while selecting them? What are those? That is my questions.
Okay. Okay. And in the meanwhile, I think Preeti ma'am, you raised your hand.
Yes, sir. I was actually, Jyoti said no certifications. I was telling about that only. There are certification courses from various B schools, and they provide these courses which are directed towards development center and assessment center only. So these are very comprehensive courses, and they interested individuals can apply and then pass those, take the test and pass those things and get certified in development center. And one such certification course which I'm aware about is from XLRI.
Okay. Okay. I think that answers to your question, Jyoti ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Right. And I also hope that we have answered the concern that you raised, Mr. Leo.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, these are all probably one will acquire all these things through experience. But yeah, when you go to the ground level, you always have not the most ideal conditions to address these things. Quite often, the issue is limitation of the time of the assessors, then the fee structure by the assessors. Not everybody may be available at the same fee, and you may have some budgetary constraints. then traveling, distance, all these issues play a role. And therefore, you may have to cut corners sometimes, but then you try to minimize as much as possible the inconvenience that we have discussed. All right. Yeah. Anybody else wants to add anything to this conversation? Dr. Deepthi, I think you're also involved in some assessment, right? And I remember.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But my office is a little crazy. I mean, they are not doing the way it has been taught here. So it's like,
Is
so
it?
I'm working on the sales professionals. I don't call it competency because it's not organizational wide, but I'm working on the competency for sales or field sales people, and only focusing on behavioral, not technical and functional at all. And we have identified, we went for Gemba walk, we identified the competencies, I've defined the proficiency levels, I have defined the behavioral anchors, indicators, everything. And I also designed the situational judgment test, and I rolled it out for self-assessment and manager assessment.
Okay.
So skip level, so business has approved and they suggested skip level managers should be doing it. So all this is done. But
Mm.
problem is, my take was we cannot just take with skip level managers because the maturity level on field that I observe is not good enough for them to go ahead and assess the reports, because and that came out in the exam this thing also. So I said we'll talk about both self and skip both, and then we will analyze, and if we see a big gap as per the desired framework, desired versus actual, then we will ask them to conduct on third level, which will be a good round of an interview, or maybe that time we will be also part of it and do some leading questions for that particular competencies. I told them ideally it is not done this way, it is done in a very different way. It
Okay.
is like self, manager, role plays, cases, studies, third party integration, a neutral perspective, psychometrics, and then it has been taken that what are their potential actually, where they are actual one. So, but then they don't want this, and then they said no, we'll only go by manager. We should trust the managers. We cannot go without the trust. And I was like, it is not about the trust; it's about the maturity. And also, we gave a workshop to the managers. We told them what are the proficiency looks like, what are they exactly. But
Yes.
they are. I mean, my HR head is fine with it, and he feels this is the right way. So either way, boss is a boss, and I said, okay, fine, let's go with that. So
Mhm.
I really do. So I'm just learning the right things here, but I can't implement that because I'm not in that position.
Okay. I think this is a typical experience of most of the professionals. See, for some reasons in our country, we go by the equations and the relationships and the hierarchies then, and the signs are the rationale behind doing things in the organizations. That is, it happens in every organization, right? Um how do you correct them? I think it's very difficult. Only when you are
Exactly.
empowered, only when you are empowered, probably you will be able to do it. Till that time, you'll have to bid your time. But then you have to continuously make your effort to correct the system or to align the system with the right way of.
So frankly, this I mean, it's not that I actually put my foot down with my own team and the level heads, section heads who's leading this. I argued, I debated there, but when it went to CHRO, and even he's mentioning the same thing, and I know if I put my foot down there, he would be like he will take it personally, and then he will not want to accept it. So then I had to actually take a foot back, and I was like, okay, fine, we'll trust the managers and do it. But I know now when I'm going to present, so this is done already. I've identified the gaps. We took 2 pilot dealership, and we have done that for around 80 employees, dealership employees. But now when I go back for the presentation on Tuesday, this is for TQM that we are doing. So there is a sensei from Japan who visits Endo-san. So when we go and present on Tuesday, I'm very sure he's going to ask the same question what I put my foot on. But as a team, my senior, that section head, he actually explained me, if you go with what senior is saying, CHRO is saying, even if you get beaten up there, you are still supported. But if you go against him and you get beaten up, they will also not support, and even you don't have support from anyone. Which I took it and I was like, okay, fine, because at the end of the day, it's not always me in the organization, it's us, and
Correct.
whatever as a team is decided. So yes,
Yeah.
we just
True.
went. We are doing competency assessment only with one view, that is manager's assessment. I don't know how is that different from performance review.
Yeah, some of these things are to do with the the awareness levels of the seniors, particularly the departmental heads or the line managers. Not everybody is aware of all these emerging concepts. These are all being talked about in Indian market only now, and many people in the hierarchy are not aware of it, so they may not appreciate this. And number two, in these matters the results will take some time, and unfortunately the organizations want immediate results. That may not be always possible.
Exactly. What we did it in around 2 months or 1.5 month gap. I think any other person, and if it was done in right way, it would have taken at least 6 months. But they want quick wins, they want that result. So it also differs. Like in my previous organization, I did the competency work. I agree we did not go for the external route, but we did it in the right way of identifying mapping the competencies through self, manager, and then we had the meeting with manager in case of this thing, and we had the role plays also in case it was a very high deviation. Then we made skip level managers intervene and do a role plays or case studies with that person, identifying if the manager is assessed right or do we need to change. So we did that. But then that organization was of only 300, 400 people. But right now, what I'm talking about, an organization, the field leadership people would be more than 30 into, I think, around 1,000 plus people, only dealership. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't
know.
know.
See, the penetration of L&D per se in India and the penetration of concepts like DC and AC are far lower compared to the developed countries. Therefore, this is a long drawn process. That is where I feel the best of L&D is yet to happen in India. Only when the people who are in the know of the latest developments, when they get into the leadership positions, when they are able to influence the decisions of the organizations, a lot more changes will happen. Till that time, I think it's a bit of struggle. What you learn, the latest concept, you may not be able to implement immediately. So don't get frustrated. Have patience and perseverance. I'm sure you will have your time to,
Absolutely,
do all this.
absolutely, sir.
Yeah,
I think L&D in India is only known that we are trainers. They don't understand we are strategizers, planners. We can involve in business. We can contribute in business. They don't see it that way. They
correct.
feel only L&D means you're a trainer. Maximum perception is that.
Yeah, and for us, training is also probably not skin deep. It doesn't go beyond the soft skills and things like that. They don't look at uh, the real core issues of training are not yet absorbed by the leadership teams in many organizations. So we'll have to have patience. Good.
I
I
mean,
think
continuation to this, we were deciding what will be the action plan, and I was telling them if there is only -1 proficiency gap, we can bridge it to on-job training and all also. But I feel that everyone should undergo the core knowledge training. One that is 20% contribution.
Correct.
So the people are asking me, okay, on-job training is okay, but what training are we giving? So I don't know how to respond, and it becomes like, okay, fine, the way you want.
Yeah. True.
Anyways,
True.
I don't want to demotivate the people.
I agree with you, but I think you have added value to our discussion. Anyone wants to give any suggestion in this context? Yes, Mr. Yugal Kishore.
I think I second the kind of a conversation like which was going on and what Dipti has just mentioned. I think most of the time people generally refer to the L&D team or maybe the training as a delivery or maybe only the executioner. So they sometimes, or I think most of the times, they do not want us to be a part of the strategy. They just want that, okay, some pills or maybe some sort of a things can be created and then you can just give it to an individual who can swallow it and then start showcasing the kind of a behavioral competencies like which can be shaped up overnight, which is not the reality. So I think this is the pain, or maybe I think this is the problem statement across industries.
Correct.
But yeah, I think the suggestion which you were also trying to give, Dr. Rao, that we really need to have patience. But I think apart from the patience, we really need to start getting involved. And when people start realizing it, I think then only we will be in a position to make a paradigm shift in this particular situation. Otherwise, it will remain same. And then again and again, people will be just asking that, okay, fine, the person has a process and technical knowledge because there are SOPs available, there are instructions available. What you need to do, just you need to make the mind shift or maybe a mindset change. Whereas, like he himself is aware of that, okay, the kind of a mindset which the person is carrying, you have not brought that mindset just only maybe I think at the initial stage itself. You have spent maybe I think a decade or 2 decades in the industry, and after that you are just showcasing that sort of a competency. How can you expect someone like who is recently joining or maybe a very young age, and these people are like Gen Zs, or I don't know what kind of a tag we should give them, but will they be able to showcase the competency in a month time or maybe in 6 months time? Not sure. But yeah, I think we really need to start injecting those kind of a thing through our training interventions. And I think development is again a continuous process. So we really need to identify those particular pieces. Maybe I think we can start creating certain nuggets. And at times we also do not get the adequate number of people. We do not get the sufficient time also. So I think one point which you guys were discussing, that they want the change to be made just in an hour or maybe in a day or in a month, which is not at all possible.
Very true. Very true. I think both of you have made very significant and valuable points. The problem in India is, unfortunately, everybody thinks that he or she is a trainer, and people don't recognize training is a different competency altogether, and not everybody has. And professional trainers are the ones who can make a difference to the organization. This.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So that belief has to happen, and I think that is where organizations like ISTD should be more of influencers at the leadership level. While ISTD is doing so much, I think the role ISTD should play at a leadership level to make training and development as a professional profession, which can bring in a lot of prosperity to organizations, is something that they have to drive, right? So let's hope that ISTD does it, and we are all a part of it. So thank you for very much for your valuable thoughts. You did enrich the discussion. So let's continue with this. The recording is about noting down the observations. You really do not have a database of uh, the assessors anywhere for this kind of work. You really do not have any prescription of what kind of background is required for being an assessor. For an insurance surveyor, there's an agency, the government gives licenses and all that. For being an assessment center assessor or a development center assessor, we don't have any prescriptions or any licensing authority or a certification authority. I think what earlier we discussed is very, very true. So there are a lot of gaps in the training industry and L&D profession, and an apex level, NHRD, ISTD, and NIPM, all these organizations should work together for the betterment of the profession and betterment of the industry as a whole. That is what is required. So the critical skill for the assessors are they must possess certain competencies, and they have to be trained in that. There have to be some licensing authority or some certifying authority for that is a need. And I think a qualification certificate is not good enough. One may go through a qualification certificate through some platform or the other. But then beyond that, I think if you want to be a licensed a surveyor in insurance, you have to be assessed by the government, and the government gives us a license for certain categories of surveys. Same way, you cannot have one license for all the assessors. So I feel that there is a need in the country for the time being. ISTD or somebody should take the lead and say we want to do this and we want to create this line of assessors and things like that. Perhaps this has to be taken up at a apex level. So oftentimes recording is done in a particular method so that it is easy to go back and understood how the data has been captured. This documentation, the design of the document is very, very important. And that makes all the difference in simplifying the integration process. Recording should help in knowing the behavior of the participant with respect to the competency, not anything else. And therefore, if five assessors are doing the assessment for say 2 or 3 candidates each, I think there must be some kind of a standardization and the way to understand that competency and making the observations. SS should record all relevant data into the recording sheet. That all that's recorded in the sheet will not go into the report, but that record should exist. Then classifying the data, the all record data is classified into competencies and behaviors. This is where the consolidation takes place, where all the assets sit together around a table and put their observations together. Experience assess, record, and classify simultaneously. That is where I said the focus of the assessor should be on the observation, not on writing and things like that. So that the designing of the document takes a lot of importance there. Classification would be process which involves relating each participant's behavior with the specific competencies and its indicators. Therefore, the interrelation people should be able to understand. I think the assessor should be able to see beyond what is written there, and he should be able to recollect and integrate the behaviors in a holistic way so that it benefits the participant and benefits the organization. Classifying behaviors helps in arriving at the actual rating that one can give to the participants. And here one has to be very, very clear. There will be differences of opinions among the assessors, and that has to be sorted out very objectively. So much clearer if assessor records body language of the participants. I think this point I made earlier with Mr. Leo. The body language plays a very important role, and that requires keen eye. And if that is not there, the assessment is going to be faulty. Rating, assessors create the rating sheet. It has to be agreed upon a priori before the process starts. It's a time-consuming task. It requires hard thinking. Sometimes, you may have to differ with people, but you have to find your way through, and finally there must be unanimity among the assessors. What is the rating scale? And rating should have the frequency of observation of the competency and the intensity with which these competencies were observed. That gives intensity is an important dimension which can also be assessed more objectively by the physical presence of the candidate rather than a virtual presence. Rating should be filled in particular formats and as such adhere to the same rules while writing to them. People should not deviate. That is where the individual ego should not come into play. Once you come into the development center, follow the protocols, follow the SOP. It can be written in past tense and third person narrative, avoiding the use of adjectives. Do not write what the participant did not do, as that amounts to a judgment. I think you are there as necessary. You are there to make an assessment through observation, but not judge a candidate. So any part, no part of the report on the candidate should be a judgment on the candidate, should only limit itself to the observations, intensity, frequency of certain behaviors. The rating should be discussed with all the other assessors. Nobody should dominate and nobody should give his own individual view there. It is not an opinion, it is a report based on your observations. Care must be taken that all assessors avoid being biased on in report rating. I think we all have some, we are human beings, we'll have some bias, but then we should be conscious that we should avoid those biases. Now, integration is a big challenge. But that is what is finally the bottom line is that allows the calibration of all observations and inferences that have been made and provide validity of the entire DC process. So the value of the report comes because of this. There are two types of integration that are done by every DC: exercise integration. In this, the assessors get into the huddle after every exercise and discuss the performance of each participant with respect to the specific competency. That is, here you are doing it at the end of each exercise. That is, your memory is fresh, you are able to recollect what the individual has done. The other one is at the end, final integration. Which process you want to follow, how do you want to do that? That has to be decided by the assessors and the the designer who is in charge of the development center process, and that has to be followed through entire the DC process. Now, integration part should allow all the assets to share their data. It is not that, some people say, okay, you've already done it, I don't have to add anything. I think everybody should be actively participating, everybody should be giving what they think is their observation and their contribution, and how do they add value to the report. No one asset should be allowed to dominate the discussion. I think this will not happen if there is, the selection of the assets is therefore very, very important. It plays a significant role. So this is final integration is again, depends on what kind of process you want to follow. So the competence and behavior in each of these exercises and the final inference about the competence for each of the participants. Final rating should be agreed upon by the assessors. In some case, the final rating is an average or summation of all the rating. Of course, this is a sort of compromise formula. I give some ratings, so the five people give five different ratings, you take an average, the compromise formula. I think a more effective way will be actually to deliberate, discuss on the competency of the person, and then understand why you are giving a rating rather than doing an arithmetic exercise. Competency is not, mapping is not an arithmetic exercise. It is more of an intellectual process and an observation process and a development process. Therefore, people should provide enough thought rather than just doing some mathematics and closing the report. And the feedback, I think that is the last step. It is the final and most critical stage of the development center. The participants are given feedback on specific competencies, how it was displayed, and the inferences were made thereof. The feedback should be given based on the data, and the participants should be invited to first share their own experience in the DC process, along with the authentic reflection of each exercise. This is where the validity of the DC comes. If the DC, the feedback from the participant is negative, that means he says that I was not given, there was interference from the assessors, I was not given enough time, I was rushing through this, the exercises were biased to a particular industry, then your entire the DC process is defeated. Therefore, the curation of the program is very, very important. And first listen to the participant and try to understand what he is conveying. That is very important part of the feedback session. Feedback should be offered as a mechanism for development, not as a judgment or as a criticism. Don't criticize the person, only pass the feedback on what he or she has done. No statement of the report, no statement of the feedback should be aimed at the individual. That is a very important care that the assessor should take. It is important there is a commitment towards the action plan at the end of the feedback. That is what actually should culminate into individual development plan with some clear objectives for the development of the participants. If that is done, the development center process is going to be of certain use and help, right? So with that, we are done with the topic for the day. And we are left with two more classes, 9th and 10th. One suggestion is that why don't we have these two classes on the next Sunday between 10 to 11:30 one and 12 to 1:30 another, and complete this course. If all of you are okay with that, we can plan for the two sessions next week. Is it okay for all of you? Should we go for that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, so I will inform the national office to schedule two sessions on the coming Sunday, 10 to 11:31. Then we'll have a break, and then we'll have another session from 12 to 1:30. Right? So till we meet again in the coming week. So wish you a very, very happy weekend and great time with the coming week. Okay, we will close the call here. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.